Hello, hello, hello. We have returned.
We have, indeed.
The old crew is back together. We got the gang back together for one last job. I shouldn't say one last job.
No, we are far from last. Let's keep doing it.
Yeah, this will go on forever, eternal. We will find replacements for ourselves and write them into our wills. And
I've been watching Westworld, and so we'll have like a replacement for ourselves made, and it will just look just like us.
Just like us. Yep.
Yeah, you won't even be able to tell the difference. What is it? A host? Yeah, we'll have a host.
Jonathan, how you've been gone for a couple weeks? How have you been?
I have indeed. I am quite well. We've had the lovely opportunity to add to our family recently, and so I'm the proud
opportunity. It's interesting.
The opportunity, right? I'm the proud father of
a man knocked on the door and said, "I've got a deal. You can't turn him down."
Yeah, as if that man was a doctor, and it's a baby girl. But she's wonderful. And so thank you for asking. So yeah, just a couple weeks, getting into the family thing. It's quite exciting. But I missed you. How are you doing, Tristan?
I'm doing pretty well. Life has been interesting. I mean, just stuff happens, but no, I've been doing well. Enjoyed having Trace on the show for a couple weeks to talk about things, to fill in for you. But extremely glad that you're back. We can get back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, things are crazy out in the world, and that all leaks into the work that we do, and the things that we deal with. And this week, I think we've got some interesting stories that they're not necessarily like directly cybersecurity related things, right? Like it's not like, hey, a new hack or a new exploit or something like that. I think we've only really got like one story that's kind of directly related to something like that. But yeah, I'm excited to go through these because I think something important for the work that we do is always kind of keeping that perspective of like the broader picture of what our jobs entail and the things that we have to be responsible for and thinking about at all times. So let's go ahead and first we're going to put that little guy up so that people know that they're watching July 15th. 2022, but we also need to go ahead and show the fact that the views and opinions expressed by Jonathan and myself are our own, and do not necessarily reflect the official opinions of GuidePoint Security, because who knows what we're going to say. So we have to go ahead and let everyone know.
It might just be crazy what we're gonna say,
Yeah, absolutely. We could say some real off the cuff stuff. We probably won't. We're pretty milquetoast guys.
I know. Well, perfect. So yeah, what do we got for GPS Live this week?
For this week, I think our first story is it's been a long running story. I mean, I remember hearing about this stuff very long ago. Yeah. But a jury has found Joshua Schulte guilty, a former CIA intelligence software engineer. Found him guilty over the fact that he leaked a huge trove of CIA documentation and tools for hacking common common applications, right?
Yeah. They were saying this was back in like 2017, and it ended up on WikiLeaks, right? Of all places, they called it the Vault 7 leak, and right. So you mentioned tools, so we're talking about how to use existing tools and systems. So you like how to spy on Skype, how to spy on Wi-Fi networks, how to spy PDF documents. They even mentioned stuff like commercial antivirus, like stuff that millions of people have installed on their computers.
Yeah. So he, there's a lot of kind of, I would say opinionated coverage of a story like this, right? I mean, I remember being in the military when everything happened with Edward Snowden, right? And it was a very divisive story that came out, because it was like, on the one hand you had people saying like, oh, he's causing critical harm to national security efforts, and on the other hand you had people being like, yes, but he also exposed an extremely dangerous operation that could be violating constitutional rights, so there of course are opinions that are flying around about and have been flying around about this I don't want to call it a hack, right? It was really just he leaked the tools that were available. But it is an interesting story from just a cybersecurity perspective when you look at the fact that I mean, every government is going to have operations,
some sort somewhere in there.
Yeah, that are focused on exploiting common tools, because your enemies are going to use common tools, right? But it's important to stay on top of these kinds of things and follow these kinds of stories, because those tools are also the ones that your everyday users are going to have on their machines. And when those are exposed and leaked, it's going to cause some pretty significant security concerns. I mean, that happened. The other big time or big incident of this occurring was the oh man, why can I suddenly not remember it? But the leak of the virus that was used to take down uranium enrichment.
Oh, you're talking about like Stuxnet.
Yes. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah. Where the Stuxnet goes into the centrifuge.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, my brain was just like, that's.
I think your brain was the centrifuge. So
yeah, my brain was the centrifuge.
So something interesting, right? To quote the article, right? So Damian Williams, the United States Attorney in Manhattan, he's calling this the most brazen and damaging acts of espionage in American history. I mean, that's some top tier stuff. To make a statement about that, he claims that he apparently had a grudge, this Mr. Schulte, against the CIA, and that led to these critical intelligence tools being made known to the public. Now, by no means is anybody suggesting anything of this nature, because right now the 9 counts against them are carrying a maximum combined sentence of 80 years in prison. That's definitely a pretty strong, statement being made here. And, I'm just saying, it just shows if the CIA can get its stuff leaked, any business can get their stuff leaked. We all know that DLP is like huge these days, especially in this case, right? Something of intellectual property, right? Tricks of the trade, how they do their secret spy. And so I think, yes, this is a very, high profile case when it comes to government and nation state stuff. But the premise is that your own internal employees could potentially be your insider threat and could, be pulling this information and sharing it online and or selling it to, another party. And so we will see what happens now that the sentences have been laid out, what the how long the prison sentence is getting to be on this one. But it's happening. And like you said, this isn't necessarily isolated. We have had multiple times where different individuals within these government organizations are leaking information, albeit via disgruntledness or some kind of sense of heroism.
And there's actually it's just an interesting kind of like historical. I don't know, but from the past, there's actually a movie that you can watch called The Falcon and the Snowman.
Okay.
It's an old movie, but it is about what was his name? Christopher Boyce. Yeah, Christopher Boyce.
Okay.
He was a defense contractor and wound up taking some work in I think with the FBI, I want to say. Okay. But he was just like a classic, like he was like super into falconry and like lived out of a van and then became a defense contractor and started working for the FBI and like became very disillusioned with the US government because of like some of the things that he saw and just started selling stuff to Russia. Like,
oh no.
Yeah. It's a crazy story too, like to go through. It's an interesting movie. There's a book about it too, but there's also a podcast called The Dollop that did a really amusing kind of like mini series on Christopher Boyce and the Falcon and the stuff that he did. But it's this stuff's been going on for as long as since governments have existed. People have been releasing the secrets, but go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, does this want to roll us into our kind of next story of government crackdown?
Yeah, I think that actually that does roll in pretty well. Speaking of the leak of tools and that the government might be using to collect information, we then have the government itself through the FTC vowing to crack down on the misuse of collected customer information.
Yeah, right.
And anonymous data.
That's so right. What when we're talking about the sensitive data, right? There's a whole industry around that concept of anonymized information, right? Every time you check out at your supermarket, a profile is created of what you bought and the time of day and all that fun stuff. But they try to avoid tagging an identity to it, right? No PII.
Right.
But the challenge is that this anonymized data can include all kinds of different trending information, right? Your cell phone is constantly collecting anonymized data, and your like your GPS locations, especially, and stuff like that. And well, I get it, right? It's all for sale. We're all very well aware if the service is free or the product, but this become more challenging, right? Like as far as how this anonymized data is being handled, like what's going on.
And you mentioned like the cross collection of that data and things like checking out the store, something like that. Like if the store is building a profile on the items that I just bought, and then you have me in that store, and that store is also mapped by Google internally, right? And I'm in an aisle searching for reviews on a product.
Yeah,
right.
It's Coke versus Pepsi, huh?
Yeah, like and all of that synthesizes together. But these the FTC has stated that it's going to start cracking down on the use of that anonymized data and how it's built into these large profiles and how that is then used to target consumers in ways that are harmful to consumers, right? And it kind of comes down to your definition, I think, sometimes of something like harm. But for me personally, like I do view the fact that a company can make basically a personally targeted ad campaign. Right. That's like just for me. And that can then go on, in the background almost. Like I remember growing up, a huge thing that kind of went through the religious community that my parents were part of was the whole like subliminal messaging in media, kind of thing, right? And it's funny looking back on it now to like looking back in like the 80s and the 90s and this idea that like there's subliminal messaging in your music that's telling your kids to buy something. It's like no, that's not
okay. Yeah.
But now it's like if I search for something. Like a product, if I'm like, hey, what's a good coffee maker, I will get articles that I'm like at the top of it that are like, this is the best coffee maker. And I'm like, this feels like it was written to me. Like it is addressing problems that I personally searched for in the past. It feels like it's so targeted. And it's crazy. And those they'll crop up on random websites. And I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff to pay attention to. But I personally view that as actually harmful misuse of that data, right?
Of course, and it's not just any data. Now we're gonna kind of jump into what we consider highly sensitive data, right? And so it's going to be the tech companies that are doing illegal use of sharing the highly sensitive data and the false claims, right? And so what do we consider highly sensitive data? Well, that was a really good example of GPS location and at the store. And if we take these two anonymous profiles and we start matching up the times and we start matching up the habits, we can start to say that maybe these two are associated with each other. And eventually, if you collect enough of these things, you can then almost ultimately bring it back. In fact, it's already been discovered that anonymized data can be re-identified when combining several of these different data sets, right? And that is becoming a known thing. What is considered highly sensitive? Stuff like health records and health information, or visitations of health locations, for instance. Imagine if a political adversary was seen visiting a cancer treatment center, right? And that hasn't been made publicly available as far as information goes regarding someone's individual health. but the data harvesting could ultimately determine, you know what, we figured out that this individual may potentially have a health condition. And so these are the kinds of things that this, new warning regarding the crackdown from the Federal Trade Commission is looking at. It's that kinds of things where this information can become dangerous when in the wrong hands.
And it's it's actually interesting. I think John Oliver did like a whole segment on this recently.
Like all that, like I don't think it was LexisNexis, but one of the data companies that can buy this stuff.
Yeah, and he went and then he made like very targeted ads, and then was like, I want to know exactly who within a 500-foot radius of the Capitol building clicked on these ads, and was like, I have like, and it's all been like tracked back so that we can say these are the people who clicked on these ads.
And they did just that they're talking about.
And I think it's funny that he did the whole segment on like, this is a huge problem. There's a reason that this is a problem, and there's a reason that it's not being addressed, and that's because it makes a lot of money. And so he did the exact thing that you kind of sometimes have to do in these situations in order to get something addressed. Is he was like, so I'm making it their problem. I have I now have stuff that you wouldn't want released. I have that you clicked on these ads that I bought. And now suddenly I do find, like, I don't think that he influenced it in any major way, but I do find it funny, the timing that like a month ago he does this thing and then suddenly the FTC is like,
oh, sorry. Well,
there we go.
I lost you there for a second, but okay. No, that was subliminal, by the way. An image like popped up real quickly on your camera feed, and now I'm very hungry for cookies. It's definitely working. So, but no, it's definitely good to see. Like you said, this data is for sale. It's, but when we bring it all together, there are going to be TV shows and organizations that are looking to compile this stuff and determine the original, person, not just anonymous identity, some user ID.
I did this. This was part of my job in the Marines was to like collect different pieces of identifying information and collate them together and be like, okay, so we can safely assume that all of these are related to this person. And then if they swapped any of those things out, it was trivial at that point to be like, oh, they made a new account. We know this is them because it's also associated with all these other things that we know associated with them.
Exactly.
So this is nothing new.
Well, so while we're on the topic of, personal and private data, I think this is a great segue into our next story here. And you picked this one out. You definitely wanted it to be part of the stories this week. And and it's funny because I actually just, we'll just say, expelled one of these from my residence not too long ago. But the story we're looking at is about how Amazon Ring doorbell cameras have been used to share their private videos with law enforcement without any intervention from
no due process. I think is the best way to put it. Like there's no due process at all. And this is not just an Amazon problem, right? This is not an Amazon Ring problem specifically. It's being highlighted because that is one of the most prolific brands of camera like this. So I think, in general, like I changed the headline that we're showing here to just be warrantless access to private security recordings is a huge concern. But this has been something that I've tracked for a long time. I've been paying attention to, like I bought a camera system for my house a couple of years ago. And one of the biggest things that I looked for was one that was entirely detached from any kind of like,
as am I record on site and it's not accessed or owned by any third party. I'm also that's high to any subscription too, which is kind of nice. But when Amazon's Ring department was asked specifically, how many times has Ring shared a user's recordings with law enforcement because of an exigent or emergency circumstance? The answer was 11. And so, what is an emergency?
It seems small. to care about, right? Like 11 out of all of the times that that something has happened within view of a Ring camera, 11 seems like a very small number, but that is, you know, in the end, that is still 11 times that the
your data
has been accessed, in this case by a government organization, and bypassing entirely the protections and process that is laid out to protect something like that in the you know, within the founding documents of our country.
So one of the things I want to call out here, and this is specific to the article, is as of the writing of it yesterday, it's not clear whether the owners, right, somebody like you and I who happens to have this doorbell apparatus, whether the owners would ever know, right? And that's, I think, what really is the kicker, that their Ring camera footage was ever whether it was accessed by a law enforcement agency and potentially saved for months or years afterward, right? Like we don't know whether the individual has been informed. Did they get told? And currently it's not clear who at Amazon would make those determinations, right? And so it's this sense of it's your data on their system, but now other people have access to it, and you may never know that's happened in the first place.
Yeah, well, you know, and Trace and I talked a little bit about this kind of thing, because this is, I think, a part of a larger push by the FTC and the FCC and different organizations. You know, when we talked about the fact that there was potential access to customer data by various different companies, and so the various organizations of the government are asking like, hey, take those off of app stores. Don't let people access those applications anymore, because it is dangerous that wow, my camera is really losing it here.
That's okay.
But yeah, you know, like taking those things off, and it's I think this is part of like the broader conversation about the push that we've been seeing, and you and I've talked about quite a bit, from the government level down to start orienting much more security focused and much more consumer friendly focused initiatives. What is going on with my camera right now?
That's okay. Well, you mentioned the word consumer focused, right? And so you're not helpless. There is a feature for the wired Ring cameras that allows you to turn on N10 encryption for the video streams. But sadly, that's not available on the battery powered versions, which tend to be a little bit more popular apparently. And the end-to-end encryption is it's not on by default. And so the end-to-end encryption would affect the ability for others to review your content. It's the fact that it lays unencrypted, which brings its own interesting challenges. And so encryption is not on by default. And so it's a feature that you have to do yourself, and it's also not available on all the platforms. So depending on what hardware you have, you're not stuck entirely. There may be an option available to you. You just have to check your deeply buried menu of settings. Like all things privacy and concerning encryption methods include.
Exactly.
I think that your camera's now working a little bit better now. Should we round it off with actually some pretty cool news coming out of one of our most popular operating systems?
Yeah, I think so. And I think this is one that you found, so you can go ahead and kick her off there.
Sure. Thanks for so there's a new feature from Microsoft coming out called Windows Auto Patch, and it's generally available. There was a bit of a beta period here, and I don't want to get this confused with the stuff that you can do already within your systems today by automatically downloading updates and asking when it would like to install. But this is definitely a big move, right? And so Auto Patch, it's an enterprise service that automatically keeps Windows and Office 365 software up to date. And the thing is that it's generally for enterprise, right? So customers with an E3 license starting in July, right? So this month. And so here's one of the things, and I want to try to grasp what's going on here. It moves the update orchestration from organizations to Microsoft themselves handling it, right? With the burden of planning the entire update process, including the rollout and sequencing, is no longer left to your IT teams. which is definitely interesting. It seems like trying to take a little weight off your shoulders.
Yeah, trying to take a little bit of the weight off. And it was interesting, actually, that like that's what caught my eye in reading this story when I saw it, because my first reaction was like, I wouldn't want that. Like I would not want to just automatically allow,
because we've always patched something immediately and it worked perfectly every time, right?
Exactly, right. Like and especially like, even though there's the cadence that Microsoft sticks to very religiously of
there was
second Tuesday.
This was quite the patch Tuesday. If anybody is interested in going and looking it up, I thought last month was busy. This month's busy too.
And it's, well, and that's the thing is like, there's like, that it's coming, but turning over that kind of like control to an organization that's outside of your own to just say, yeah, go ahead and patch all of that, like regardless of if this might break old systems or anything like that, like I rely on this old version, that kind of thing. But it is good to note that they have accounted for that to a certain extent and built that into the process here.
Right. Yeah, those are the big concerns. Stuff like, for instance, implementing multiple groups to allow testing. Right. So they call it a test ring. And then that's a number of devices to roll the patch out and see how it goes. Then you can roll to the next ring, and then you eventually grow up to what's called the broad ring, which is the rest of the devices. The other thing that they mentioned is that the auto patch has a built-in halt and rollback feature that can help block updates from being applied to some of the bigger rings. Gives you the opportunity to actually test, to actually halt a push out. It's very cool, and it's definitely worth looking into, right? This is something that may help maybe potentially smaller IT teams that are overwhelmed with the amount of systems they have to deal with patching, or even just help streamline some of these features within organizations today. And we all understand, like you said, patching is important. There are Windows vulnerabilities that are coming out on a regular basis still that need to be addressed. And so hopefully this might make the world a little bit of a safer place. I like, that we saw, other companies like, Android was taking on some of that multi-factor stuff. And now we're starting to see patching is also being addressed. We've come a long way. It's still cat and mouse, but it's nice to see that security is being considered. Right. And we're not constantly clicking remind me in 4 hours, remind me in 24 hours.
When would you like to update? No.
Busy.
I think too, it is interesting. There's a general push in my mind, at least the way that I'm tracking it, with a lot of these changes that we're seeing towards treating these kinds of things more like as some, like I play a lot of games, right? Like there was a push in the last few years in games to move towards a games as a service model, right? So like there's just a baseline game that comes out, and then they just continuously update and patch it and are always changing what's in there. You got stuff like Destiny, Fortnite, right? They're games as a service. And I think it's really interesting to see these kinds of moves. To me, this is almost like the kind of like low level management as a service. Like we're seeing these types of things move away from being move away from being like, yes, you have purchased an operating system and we're going to patch it and everything's on you from this point forward, to like, you've purchased the operating system and there's going to be this like low level kind of maintenance fee moving forward, and we're just going to take care of the nuts and bolts of it for you. I think it's an interesting move, and I am glad to see that as the industry is moving that way, because almost all industries are moving towards that as a service model. And that kind of like subscription based model, to see it being focused on things that are actually useful towards security, instead of just saying like, and we've changed the font. Like, so really excited to see that.
Totally.
Fonts are
but cool. So just kind of really quick recap here. Our first article regarding our CIA engineer came from the New York Times. The FTC cracking down on anonymized sharing of data is from the Hacker News. Amazon's access to your Ring doorbell video sharing platform is from The Verge. And finally, to round it off, Bleeping Computer is teaching us all about the new Windows auto patch feature for E3 and E5 licenses.
Yep. So Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to catch you again next week. And until then, I have been and will continue to be Tristan Morris.
And I'm Jonathan Singer with a whole lot of new stuff going on at home. So looking forward to it.
New dad, Jonathan Singer.
What's up?
All right. So we will see you again next week, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend.
Take care.